Evening, everybody. It's 7:20 on Wednesday. um, so I've had a few questions, and one that I am going to tackle this evening is what do you do when your teen is so dysregulated that words don't work? Now, this is a great question, and this is a question I get asked so often. So you are not alone in wondering about this. And if you've ever tried reasoning with your teenager during a meltdown or when they're really dysregulated and nothing's working, you're not failing. There's a reason why this is so difficult, which I will come on to in a moment. So your teen, when they're dysregulated, they are in survival mode and conversations just won't land. Okay, so they are when they are dysregulated, their thinking part of their brain is effectively shut down. It's gone offline, so they can't think, problem solve, reason. All of those executive functions kind of switch off, which is why talking doesn't work. They will be struggling to process what you are saying and to make sense of what you are saying and to do anything about what you're saying. So they are completely in their emotional centre. So that's why the talking just doesn't work. Okay, they're in survival mode in that moment. They're sensing some kind of danger internally or externally that's in emotional danger, probably, but that's put them into that fight flight. So it's a very normal response. Um, and the more dysregulated they become, the less that those words will be processed. So, the further they go into feeling angry or feeling upset or just overwhelmed in any way, the less words that you should be using, which can feel quite counterintuitive because as parents, when our children are struggling, we start to feel anxious, we want to make everything better, and it's our own nervous system becomes triggered, and so then we get pulled into this feeling of I need to fix this, I need to make it all better. Anxiety creates that urgency, so we're having to kind of work against our own natural response by slowing things down and reducing the verbal dialogue, reducing the words. um, so in that moment, try and stay away from, overly reassuring or trying to solve whatever issue it is that's created that dysregulation in the moment, because they won't be able to make sense of and process that. Try and stay away from fixing it. And I know that is really hard. Um, so instead, what I want you to think about is, what is my teen's nervous system telling me right now? And that might give you some clues around what it is they need. And it might be that that they have just been in a really sensorially sensorially overwhelming environment, and they need to be supported to move somewhere a bit quieter and free from stimulation. It might be that they've had a really tough day at school and they might be struggling to verbalize what's happened, or maybe they don't want to talk about what's happened. Maybe they just need a bit of space and time to process that stuff. But if they are really in their emotions, they're really, really heightened, and you are feeling that you need to give them a hand to calm down, that is kind of your job in that moment. So your job is to lend your calm to your teen. And as I say, nervous systems are contagious, emotions are contagious. So it might be that you are feeling anxious or frustrated or angry yourself in that moment. So if you need to take a breather, as long as your teen is safe, that is absolutely fine to do that. So go off and do what you need to do, take some deep breaths, just kind of come back to yourself. And then you will be in a much stronger position to help your teen to calm down. Um, so we're always thinking about regulation before reasoning, connection before reasoning, and before fixing. So I'm going to come on to some practical kind of strategies that in the moment you can use if your teen's just gone straight up here. It might have been that it's been building up for a while. Sometimes it can appear to have come from nowhere, although it usually hasn't, but you may not have noticed it you know, that things were impacting your teen, or you may not have been around. They may have just come home from being out or being at school, whatever. So the first thing, as I said before, is to reduce language. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't talk at all. It just means that you are giving really clear, simple guidance. So it might be reassurance, you're okay. It might be validation. I can see that you're angry. I can see that you're upset. It might be guiding them. So let's just go into the other room. Let's just get outside for a walk. But you're keeping that verbal dialogue as reduced as possible and as clear and concrete as possible as well. Just thinking about their autistic communication needs within that as well. The second thing is, in that moment, reduce all demands. So don't ask your teen questions, even asking, are you okay, or what will help you? They are putting another demand on them that they need to come up with something. And remembering that their thinking part of their brain has gone offline, so they will really struggle to give you an answer or even to think of an answer. And it's likely to push them more into that dysregulated kind of state. Reduce all expectations. So if there's anything you were expecting them to do, just they need a bit of time to calm before you can come back to that. And absolutely pause any problem solving. That doesn't mean that you don't do that problem solving, but you can just come back to that later once they're calm and their thinking brain is back online. And then the third thing is to reduce sensory load. So if your child is autistic and they have sensory sensitivities, if they are already heightened, their nervous system is already up here, their capacity to cope with processing any additional sensory information will be a lot smaller than it usually is. So if you can reduce noise levels, you can turn the lights down, reduce the number of people that are around them or move them to somewhere quieter. Touch, your teen might benefit from some touch, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Other teens just want you to kind of back off. That is okay. You know your teen best and you know what will help them. But just thinking about anything that might be stimulating them in terms of their different senses, and try and reduce all of that down. So you're making those environmental changes in that moment. And then number 4 is to co-regulate through your own nervous system. So this might be thinking about things like the rate that you are breathing. So it might be deliberately slowing your breathing down. You can invite them to do that with you. Thinking about your voice tone, so having a calm tone of voice, clear but calm. And also the pace at which you are moving and the pace at which you are talking. So again, we're getting that emotional contagion, we're getting pulled in, we start to talk a lot faster, a lot louder, we're moving, we're tensing up. And if you've probably had experiences yourselves where you've been around somebody who is dysregulated themselves and you catch it and it's hard to feel calm. So you need to kind of think about how you're feeling, try and calm your own system down, deliberately talk a bit more slowly, a bit more calmly, think about your voice tone, your body language, your posture, and all of those things. And then the 5th thing is thinking sensory rather than verbal. Okay, so this is more about, we've talked about reducing those sensory demands, but also your teen might benefit from things that they crave sensorially, and particularly when they're dysregulated, sensory stimulation that might help their nervous system to calm. So things like walking, because it's quite rhythmic, bilateral, weighted blankets or having something weighted that sits on their knee, having headphones on, so having that pressure over their ears and to reduce the sound as well. Fidgets, so any sensory toys that they like to use, and things like press-ups or push-ups against a wall. and maybe having a quite quiet, calm space in your home that you can kind of guide them to, hopefully at an early point before they've reached kind of melting point, but to try and get them somewhere a little bit quieter in the home. And if you've got somewhere that you've kind of designed with them as well, where they have put things in there that help, that they know help them to feel calm, and you can guide them to go to that place. But remember that every teen is different, and be curious about what works for your teen. And I wouldn't, I guess we're thinking a little bit about kind of prevention here, but the biggest impact happens before a crisis, really. So when your teen is calm and they have access to their thinking brain, it might be that you can think with them about the sorts of things that help them in that moment. Do they need you? Do they need a tight hug, or do they need you to back off? What sort of things might they need around them when they're struggling that you can help them to have access to? So you can have those conversations when your teen is calm, and also around what those warning signs might be. Now, if your teen is autistic, they may struggle with things like interoception, which means that they may not notice those signals that their body's giving them, that they are starting to struggle emotionally. So you might need to do a little bit of guesswork with them by sort of observing them when they're starting to become dysregulated and making some notes on what you've noticed or what other people have noticed, perhaps, a teacher at school or a family friend or grandparents or whoever, so that you can have a little bit of a set of notes or a checklist, if you like, that you can then use to start to notice, hopefully at a little bit of an earlier point, when your teen is starting to become dysregulated, because they might struggle to do that for themselves. They may also struggle to verbally communicate their emotions, so that's called alexithymia. So it might be about having, again, you being able to say to them, I can see that you are getting angry, I can see that you are getting stressed, I can see that you're finding things really tough right now. So they're not having to do that for themselves. So you're learning about also what sort of triggers, what things might tip them into this nervous system overwhelm. So I've talked in another video about the pyramid, which at the bottom we've got safety, and connection. That's always needing to be there, and it's always the most important thing in terms of nervous system regulation, that they feel safe and that they know that you are there and you will support them. And they've got that safety within your relationship and in their environment as well. And then the next bit is the demands and the triggers. So if you know, for example, that your teen really struggles when they've been in a busy environment, and you know that you're going to auntie's birthday tomorrow and they want to come along, but you know it's going to be busy, there's going to be lots of people, there's going to be a lot of demands placed on them, and it potentially could be quite triggering. You can then factor in some downtime for after that event and before as well, so that they've got enough capacity, hopefully, to manage, but also to come up with a bit of a plan for whilst they're there, in terms of what's going to happen, who's going to be there, where can they hang out, where can they go if they need a bit of quiet. Can you have a bit of a code word that they say to you when they need to leave, and they've got full permission to do that, and you can support them with that. So just thinking always about prevention, the kind of crisis management, if you like, the stuff when they are really struggling, they're really dysregulated, wouldn't need to happen as often if you can think about those bits lower down in that pyramid to try and prevent that nervous system overwhelm from happening, so it's then not happening as often and hopefully not for as long as well. So you can also create a bit of a calm down plan with them, so just even 2 or 3 things that they need from you. It might be objects, it might be things that you can do or say or whatever, that will help them in that moment. Again, thinking about creating that at a time when they are calm. And going back to those demands and those triggers, wherever you can reduce those demands, and that's a whole other topic which I could always do another video on. Let me know if that would be helpful about how to reduce those demands and what sort of demands I'm referring to there. But if you can reduce those demands, what that means is they then have a bit more capacity to cope with things like things happening unexpectedly, or to cope with sensory stimulation, or to cope with social interactions that might otherwise be really exhausting for them. So those things are still going to be having an impact, but actually if there's less on their plate, less filling their bucket in the first place, they're going to have more capacity to be able to cope with those things. So yeah, just to say as well that, although your teen might need space when they're dysregulated, and that's really common, you can still maintain that connection by letting them know, hey, I'm nearby, I'm sitting on the stairs, or I'm just going to make a cuppa. Let me know if and when you need me. So they know that if they need you, you're around, but you're not kind of intruding on their space that they need to calm. So just some key takeaways. So less talking and more noticing, safety before solutions, and co-regulation is the absolute key there. And connection often helps that regulation to return, and that doesn't mean necessarily being physically present. It can be being nearby and them just knowing. So I'd love to hear from you. If you're watching this back on replay, or if anybody wants to comment now, what's one thing that you've found that helps your teenager to regulate? So maybe just think about that, because if you look back over time, often you can think about times when your teen has really struggled and they've kind of hit that overwhelm, that crisis point, and you've kind of accidentally done something and thought, oh, they've kind of come out of that, they've calmed a lot quicker than they normally would, or that worked quite well. And other times you might have done something and it's just got a whole lot worse, and that's obviously a sign to you to not do that thing in the future. But just kind of track back and have a look at, what has worked for your team, what has made things worse, and that will give you a lot of information. So I am planning to do these lives on a regular basis. This is my first one in a long time, so I'm a bit nervous, and I've probably just kind of gone off on tangents and jumbled along. Hopefully what I've said has been helpful and it makes sense, and hopefully I will get better at them as time goes on. But if you do have any topic ideas or any questions that you would like me to cover on these lives, I will not name you, I will not identify you in any way, but I can guarantee you that any question that you have, lots of other parents will have that very same question and will really be, grateful for you speaking up and asking for some information on that. So please do DM me, or just DM me. That's absolutely fine. Or comment on this live, and I will put it in my little notebook of list of topics to cover on these lives. So thank you very much for listening. I really, really appreciate it. I hope this has been helpful. If anybody's got any questions or comments, as I say, just DM me or comment on this, and I will speak to you soon.